Hey, what's up? It's Jim, and today I'm going to talk about the film Pete's Dragon from 2016. John Waters used to have a saying that they should remake bad movies and make them better. And although I know a lot of people have pleasant memories of the original Pete's Dragon, it wasn't really the greatest Disney family-friendly film ever made. And I think this film kind of does a lot of correcting and making a better Pete's Dragon than the original really was, but also a very, very different Pete's Dragon. This film really has very little to do at all with the original. The only things it has in common are the basic concept that there's a kid named Pete, that he has a dragon named Elliot. It's released by Disney. That's kind of it. It doesn't even take place in the same town. It's like a different town, a different setting, a different era. The original took place in 1900. This takes place in the 70s and 80s, but it never gives you a specific year. It kind of reminds me of what happened with The Thing from Another World and then John Carpenter's The Thing, where you have two drastically different interpretations of a concept and a story. Now, this obviously was not based on a book, or to my understanding, I don't think Pete's Dragon was. But it takes such a different approach to it, and I think it's just so refreshing to also have a film that just understands maybe not the Pete's Dragon that normally a studio would think we want, but the kind of Pete's Dragon that we would actually want to see. This is one of the few films in our remake, reboot culture type of thing that will actually probably stand the test of time, but even if it doesn't, it's good enough that you'll kind of actually want it to, which is especially surprising, to be honest. I never thought I would like a Pete's Dragon remake this much. This was always a weird project. It was directed by David Lary, who directed this art house outlaw film Ain't Them Body Saints, which I didn't really like that much, but he's not the kind of director you'd expect to do a big Hollywood movie. On paper, I guess, sort of, because with Colin Trevorrow and Jurassic World, where you have a director who does indie stuff, the idea in Hollywood at least, I don't know how much Colin Trevorrow or whatever had involvement in Jurassic World, but it's usually that the producers feel they're easier to control, and it never really feels like their vision gets to be in there as much. And in Pete's Dragon, this feels very much like an auteur movie. It doesn't feel like Disney was at the reins. It feels like a David Lowery movie. It's probably my favorite David Lowery movie, although I've only seen two, and I think he did another one, which I don't know. It feels like they actually got the stamp and the nuance of an indie director in a big budget movie. This is like probably one of the best examples of bringing an indie director to do a big tentpole type of movie, and it actually working out in both the ways they want it to work and both the ways we as film fans actually want it to work. It's kind of amazing. Although he owes a lot and is very influenced by 70s directors, it's like one of those 70s directors honestly knew how to make a kids film in the post-Spielberg era. It reminds me of so many things, Spielberg in particular for a lot of people, in particular E.T., and a lot of wonderful, amazing kids films. The kind of kids films you watch over and over again. It feels like the kind of amazing triumph of studio filmmaking that lets auteurs make amazing movies, but it also is just such an amazing, interesting kids film that I'm just sitting there watching it going like, holy crap, I really love this film. It reminds me of Spike Jonze' Where the Wild Things Are in terms of its indie low-keyness, but also works so well as a kids film because the stakes feel real. This isn't about the end of the world. The Russians are not coming to take Pete away to use him as a bomb in their war or something like that. It's very small in its stakes, but it feels so relatable and real. It's such a refreshing turn of pace for a summer that feels boring and bland. We have a film that understands that what you really need to get these films to work is the character and their relations to one another, and particularly the relation of Pete and Elliot, and how wonderful all that can be in a kids film that plays just as well as a slow burn indie kind of drama as it does a big Hollywood movie, all mixed together in kind of a very wonderful and probably one of the better kids films I've seen in a very long time. Pete, who is on a road trip with his parents or an adventure, as they tell him what an adventure is, and then suddenly after they see a deer on the road swerve and their car gets in a massive accident killing the parents, but Pete survives and he goes off into the woods and he's about to be attacked by a pack of wolves, and then Elliot, the magical dragon, comes and saves him, and they live in the woods together for the next 6 years, and Pete doesn't see another human. Then a logging company and a logger, played by Carl Urban, Judge Dredd himself, starts logging an area that they're actually not supposed to. The daughter of one of the loggers, and Bryce Dallas Howard's daughter, I think, finds Pete and follows him, and they find his nest and take him back to town, and then Elliot tries to find Pete, and they try to figure out what to do about Pete and possibly Elliot. Elliot, who's been a long urban legend in their town that there might be a dragon in the woods, and that urban legend might actually be real, and that they do have a real dragon in the woods, and what does this little boy have to do with it? The interesting thing about this Pete's Dragon is that the original Pete's Dragon was made in 1977. It was right when Blockbuster was starting, and so there's a lot of holdovers that were kind of like representing the past classic Hollywood studio system that hadn't kind of ended yet, and Pete's Dragon is very much that. That's not to be insulting or anything, that's just they developed it a long time ago, and it came out in 77, and Star Wars hit, and most kids at the time cared more about Star Wars. Pete's Dragon did fine, but it was never a massive hit, and this is more like a post-Spielberg Pete's Dragon. If you look, when Pete is walking through the woods and you look at all the trees, it feels like the early scenes, like the first couple shots in E.T., when E.T.'s walking through the woods and the trees look like supernaturally, surreally tall. It really has that kind of feel to it, and the whole idea of a little kid and his very unique kind of special imaginary friend feels very like E.T. Although David Lowery apparently was more influenced by things like Totoro and Spirited Away and a lot of Ghibli stuff, which very much shows in this. A lot of people are pointing out the Iron Giant. I'm sure he's seen it, but it was never name checked, although he doesn't name check E.T. either, and then he name checks the Ghibli documentary, which I don't see how that's influencing this, but whatever. But I think Pete's Dragon understands why that Spielberg stuff worked, but also understands the kind of down-home nature of the late 70s, early 80s. That kind of like country music nature. There's a lot of country music in this, and not annoying country music, so that's a turnoff. Fairly like down-homesy, folksy kind of music, which was surprising. Like Leonard Cohen, I believe, is in this. Although this was actually shot in New Zealand. As a kid who grew up doing a lot of camping, this felt like Virginia. This felt like the East Coast to me. A lot of people say it's more West Coast, but I've never been there, so I'm just going to go with my interpretation because I'm the one who saw it. But it did remind me of that, and it did feel like that more simple country farming world, very authentically, and Ain't Them Body Saints felt that way as well. Very 70s and very, to me, like folksy, down-home kind of country living. It's interesting that Pete's Dragon does that so well, and it's interesting that he seems to very much love the 70s David Lowery, and he got to work with his screenwriter from Ain't Them Body Saints, Toby Hallbrooks, and it feels like that all throughout it. It feels like an indie director who got a chance at a kid's film, and it never gets too big, but it understands those stakes matter. It understands the stakes of Pete's Dragon that matter to the kid, and it kind of almost understands why something like Totoro is so successful and why people still talk about that fucking movie and still watch it every year and still love it and buy too much merchandise for it, is that relationship with that creature is paramount for any of these movies. And there's a whole section of just setting up Pete and the dragon and their relationship, and that's all that matters. This film tries really not to have much to do with the original film. Not even like Bryce Dallas Howard's character, you think she would be named Nora after the woman in the original film. No, there's kind of some basic framework ideas, but like what it understands is by removing those, what is really important, and it's that Pete and his dragon need to work. The reason you like Calvin and Hobbes, it's because of all the time you spent with Calvin and Hobbes. Same with Totoro. That scene with the little girl on his belly is important. And the reason it's important, because most of us get our relationships, I don't know about your life or anything, by hanging out, by chilling out with someone. That's how relationships are really made. You have those dramatic moments, but just chilling out with someone and being able to hang out with someone represents a lot. And I think for us as people, although movies are often, and especially tentpole blockbuster movies, are often overly dramatic, and it works for most of them, well, not always. In this, it understands what's important, and as we see them just like kind of snuggling together or catching food or hanging out and understanding their relationship together, that matters so much. And it makes Pete's Dragon a very strong movie, that we understand everyone's relationship to one another, even if it's not clearly defined even for themselves. We understand that. And Pete's Dragon's so good at character, it's probably one of the best films to understand its characters, blockbuster movies at least, since Captain America Civil War. I rarely see the kind of character work that David Lowery brings to this. I heard Disney had a lot of faith in him, and after watching this I was like, holy fuck, I do too. Even more than when I saw his indie movie. Pete's Dragon, I hope, becomes more of a classic. I love, like, Where the Wild Things Are was one of my favorite kids films I've seen, and it's a kids film that understands what's going on in filmmaking and made by a very good filmmaker. Oftentimes kids films live in this like weird kind of Hollywood organized bubble that doesn't actually act like what's going on in filmmaking, but it's interesting when they break that mold. They often make more interesting kids films, and some are more interesting than actually good, but Pete's Dragon has a script that's well written enough and has good enough actors that it really works. I haven't cried at a movie in a while, and I didn't like bawl or anything, but I did tear up at certain moments because these people like mattered to me, you know? And I think Pete's Dragon like like understood that so well. It's like a well-made kind of down-home little kids film, and I love that. And I say little, and it's not. It costs like all this money and shit, but it was shot in New Zealand and stuff, but it doesn't feel that way. Hollywood can have all this CG and stuff, but really when you make a connection, that's what the beautiful thing is. When you have a connection with an audience and you have a connection with the dragon and the characters in this film, that's the amazing thing. That's what David Lowery really brought to this. This is definitely the best directed Disney remake of this current wave of Disney remakes, is the best one. And the fact that it shows more of a director voice, more than even the film that Jon Favreau directed earlier this year, is frankly amazing. It says probably a lot more about how all those movies weren't that great, but David Lowery is able to bring a certain voice to this that's just simply amazing to see on the big screen. It's actually the first time I've ever really liked Bryce Dallas Howard in anything, even like compared to like Jurassic World and stuff. I thought her shtick worked better in this. It might be just like good casting rather than good acting, but I still thought she was good, so let's just give it to her. The two kids in this, though, steal this movie. One of the things I love about Pete's Dragon is, and this is gonna sound mean, but I like that when there's like ugly kids in movies, or normal looking kids, and that was very 70s things, it works conceptually absolutely with this movie. It also like gives kind of a normalcy to it, even though you have all these Hollywood actors who you know from all this other stuff all around it. Having these kids makes the kid's story all that more relatable in an odd way. Oakes Fagley is just so fucking good as Pete. And a lot of this is about an abused child or a child of the wilderness, which he was, kind of understanding human society or normal relationships. And I don't know if Oakes Fagley understood that as an actor, but it comes through in his performance so well. It feels natural. It feels like, honestly, can't imagine him being like a normal kid. He was so just amazing in this. It was quite an astonishing, probably one of the best kid performances I've seen in a while. Una Lawrence, who was in Southpaw, was also very good. She looks so different than in Southpaw, but she had such a normalcy about her. I really liked her. She looks like Shelley Winter's kid or something. She really brings a responsible presence to it. You kind of get that she's like a good kid. She's good at school. And then afterwards I was like, there's never a part where it establishes she's good at school. I just got that from her performance. Or maybe that's just me labeling people, but I don't know. Wes Bentley was actually good I haven't seen really him in as much stuff, but I thought he was decent. He's probably the least of the people in this. Carl Urban I quite liked, and he's good at playing like a bad guy, but kind of a bad guy. He misunderstands what's going on. That's something that's good about like even Judy Hopps in Zootopia, where you have a character who's not necessarily, they might think the wrong things, but not necessarily a bad person, and I like that. It definitely is like a Ghibli, you can see that influence where the antagonist isn't the center of it, and they're not playing the bad guy villain, and that is a Ghibli influence. But in this, he's not even super the bad guy, he's just kind of misbegotten almost. And Robert Redford I thought was very good, and I like him working in Disney. He was good in Winter Soldier, he was good in this. He understands how to use his Hollywood presence. He's been an actor for so long, you'd think he would, and of course he does. I liked him in this. I know he likes like nature, and he cares about nature and things. Some people have said he doesn't look as natural when he's telling the kids the story, but I thought it worked rather well. He doesn't look as like old and like decrepit as maybe he should for his age. He just takes good care of himself. He has such a presence about him that even when he's with everyone else, it's like, you know, he's lived a life, and him being the person who knows this dragon, it's like he has that wonder about him still in his eyes. Robert Redford really knows how to use his persona. In this and Winter Soldier, you can absolutely see a line of him understanding in a very postmodern way how he is perceived as an actor, and I think that's really interesting. Although he's made other films in between those, these are the only ones I watched. So regardless of that, they both have that common thread of him understanding his presence and what he represents for that movie. Pete's Dragon is kind of the rare kids film that will have such an amazing connection to you as an audience. It's really one of the glorious kids films of our modern age, and it's just a film I really fell in love with. I think it isn't going to be with the Iron Giant or Totoro. It's not going to be up there, or even Where the Wild Things Are maybe, but it's definitely a film that just makes me have faith in that sometimes this stuff can work out, and kind of doesn't make you thinking the same kind of normal kind of kids boring movie that you're used to. It has heart in it. That's the one thing about Pete's Dragon I think that I'll go away with, and that's why I love Iron Giant and all the kids films that you do still love as an adult, is because that heart is there. And that's a certain thing that you need a story like this, a story about you and an imaginary friend. The reason you have that imaginary friend is because you need it, and you need something to grab onto and hug and snuggle with and be like, it's been a bad day, but I need to hold you. That might sound silly, and that might sound like I'm being over dramatic, but you wanted a relationship with someone who would always protect you and always kind of wrap you up and make you feel safe. And I think Pete's Dragon understands that and understands what's important to a kid's film and important to a great movie. When we're talking about things like Stranger Things or something like that uses nostalgia and things of that nature. And David Lowery clearly has a lot of nostalgia for the 70s and 80s, but I think Pete's Dragon understands how to use that nostalgia to tell a story and how that was right for that story. That was definitely kind of the attitude of the time, these more kind of low-key kind of 70s kind of films. I wish this film had come out in the 70s. I think 70s kids would love it. I love how David Lowery wraps that all up and makes such a successful, amazing Pete's Dragon. I just like a good Hollywood special effects movie that makes me believe, and I think Pete's Dragon made me believe in all that and made me feel like the system would work. Now I probably actually won't feel like that 2 weekends from now, but Pete's Dragon kind of makes me believe in all of that because it makes me believe in this story, and that's something a lot of directors can't do as well. And I think David Lowery kind of made an amazing filmmaking triumph of Hollywood filmmaking and our modern era, and it makes me kind of believe in all this, at least temporarily. And it made me walk out and know I just saw a really amazing, really beautiful kids movie that has all the heart and soul that I want from a great movie in general, and how that's just a beautiful thing to behold, that respects its characters as much as it respects its audience to sweep you away and take you on an amazing journey that just feels so real and relatable. You can't really walk away with it without noticing how good this fucking thing is. So if you have seen Pete's Dragon and you would like to talk about it, then comment below in the comments and subscribe if you would like to.